Thank you, Honourable Chair. Chair, I just want to say, I think what we must take note of is actually the prediction that for this financial year, 26-27, we predict an overspending of 749 million. Now, we try our best to decrease the overspending in terms of previous years. So I just want to put that on record already. As far as the targets are concerned, if we, for instance, look, as I said, in administration, 3 targets not achieved. You know, I always say statistics is quite interesting. And for instance, if you look on slide 11, the percentage of officials found guilty of corrupt activities, there was 1 official, only 1. He was found guilty, and it was an arbitration, and it referred to irregularities in the disciplinary process. We're still busy with it, but that 1 case brought the target down to 14.29%. So I just want to give perspective in terms of the targets. The fact of the matter is we did not meet our target. On the amendment bill, I just want to say that the fact that overcrowding is a huge problem, and I will come to that, and foreigners in our facilities, I actually said that we cannot wait for the complete amendment bill before we deal with that. And I am coming forward with a separate, specific sort of amendment of Section 73 of the Correctional Services Act. We are in the process. We've waited for comments from the NCCS, the National Council on Correctional Services, which I am informed that we received this week. We will then go through the process of JCPS to JCPS and to Cabinet. And if you did follow the binational commission meetings with different countries, you would note that last Friday, I signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of Zimbabwe for interstate transfer of foreign nationals. Now, the majority of our foreign nationals are Zimbabweans, and we will continue with other countries as well. And part of the decision of those binational commissions is that by June next year, we must report back in terms of our amendments of Section 73. So we hope that we will get the support and that we, by say, the mid of next year, the Section 73, who at this moment actually prohibits interstate transfer, will be amended to ensure that we can do that. Therefore, we still continue with the, can I say, whole amendment bill as such, and we envisage also a separate Parole Act that came out of the Parole Summit we had last year, September. So we will come forward with that. So we're going to have a busy year next year in terms of amendments. Yes, we set in our target, 31st July. We do not comply to that. And then, of course, our technology is always a problem. But I want to just put some focus on the overcrowding issue. You have the figures there, the numbers. The latest we have, as on the 18th of August, we have now overcrowding, and it was mentioned, of 62%. We have 63,400 remand detainees, 110,129 sentenced inmates, state patients 425. It gives us a total of 173,955. On the foreigners, we have a total of 30,527, where 15,243 are remand detainees and sentenced 15,284. Now, just to give also a perspective on that, Honourable Chair, when I became the Minister in 2024, 3 July, we had round figures about 103,000 sentenced people in our facilities. We have a bed space of just, say, 107,100 beds. The remand detainees at that stage was around about 58,000. Now you can see it has increased. The sentences are only they themselves increased to 110,000. So in the matter of, say, 2 years, we had an increase of 7,000 sentenced inmates. We all know that we said that the criminal justice system must become more effective. I'm still worried about our remand detainees, although there is some movement. But we know that the more effective the police comes, the, can I say, increase we have in terms of our overcrowding. And we only have so many centers. We only have so much space, if I can put it that way. Yes, the Minister of Finance announced in the beginning of this year that we will build 2 facilities, 2 billion budgeted. But we know to build a correctional center takes time, unfortunately, very long, too long as far as I'm concerned. So the overcrowding issue, and I'm not going through because we had specific presentations on how we're going to deal with overcrowding. And I presume we were going to have it again. So I'm not going into all that detail. So we try our best in terms of that. And I think if we can solve those specific issues and we go back to our targets, then the picture will increase in terms of obtaining our targets. So that is in short from my side. Honourable Chair, I can say we can look at the finances. You will note that there are even more expenditure. The early retirement process, everybody thinks it was completely paid by Treasury. It's not so. We also had to have additional funds. But let me say this, that we know that we can do much more in correctional services to see how we can deal with our challenges. Therefore, we are busy with programs. Unfortunately, it takes time, but be assured that we will continue trying our best to do it. There are problems, but as I said at many times, let's take hands with the Portfolio Committee to see how we can deal with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those additions and also for taking us through the agreements with Zimbabwe. We will wait for the formal communication through the Speaker's office like it normally does with the other agreements so that we get a full detail of what it pertains and what it means. And I think that also equally serves as, whilst we are still here, because I'm not sure what time we'll conclude, would serve as one of the important aspects that the department must prioritize the bill, seeing that in this quarter, it's not being prioritized. So that in the next quarter, we can get a clear detail on how far you are with the process. When are you anticipating to present to cabinet, so that cabinet can prioritize it and send it to parliament, so that this portfolio committee can now start with the business of amending that bill, because those inmate transfer to other countries, they can only be realized in practical sense once the amendment are made to the current bill. So whilst the bill is as it is, those good initiatives that are being signed will serve just as on paper, but in practical sense will never be done. So we hope that the department will take that as one key important aspect. And in the second quarter, when you appear, you will be able to give us a detailed progress on how far you are, instead of consultations. We understand there must be consultations, but at some point we must start with the actual work in amending the bill. Members, I'll now invite you for questions, clarities to the presentations. I'll start with Honorable Klute, Honorable Ngaba, Honorable Engelbrecht. It's yourself. There's another Ngaba as well here. I'm calling you. I see you are looking on your far right. So I'm now confused.
No, Chairperson, my surname doesn't have an X. Ngaba, not Ngaba. There's
Okay.
no Ngaba.
So you were looking at the X1. Okay. Honorable Engelbrecht, you follow. Ms. James, it will be unfortunate for you to leave without speaking. You'll come after. Shangas. For Ugutu, you missed the Bramfley visit. Uzawuthetha when the submission. Honorable Muela, Babkasa, Honorable Niehaus, and Honorable Sokopo. You will close it for us in that sequence.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, Minister, National Commissioner in the delegation of the Department of Correctional Services. Firstly, allow me to welcome the presentation that was presented by the department, Honorable Chair. Allow me also to go straight to my questions. On slide 26, 5 inmates escaped during the quarter, 2 from the Eastern Cape and 2 from the Free State and the Northern Cape, and 1 from KZN. We need to go beyond the statistics here. What these inmates recapture, what exactly caused each escape? Was it poor supervision, infrastructure weaknesses, negligence, or possible collisions? And what action has been taken against the officials where there was a failure? On slide 14 and 31, the national overcrowding target was 50%, but the department is sitting at 58%, while the Eastern Cape is at 85%. The department says admissions are higher than releases, but this has been the explanation for years. What concrete reduction plan is being implemented in the Eastern Cape, Gauteng and Western Cape? And what measurable reduction does the Department of Correctional Services expect to achieve in each of these regions by the end of the financial year? Then, Honorable Chair, on slide 15 and 32, the department reports that 326 offender profile reports could not be considered because parole boards had vacancies and could not be formed quorums. This is a very serious because offenders may remain in overcrowded centers simply because the department did not fill the necessary post. How many vacancies are there on correctional supervisions and parole boards in each region? When will they be filled? And what is the plan to deal with the 326 reports that were not considered? On slide 16 and 37, the department achieved only 44.96% against a 63% target for offenders completing the TVET college subjects. The department says there is a shortage of technical educators. Educators need to be trained on a new curriculum, and learner support material is insufficient. So how can the Department of Correctional Services speaks about skills development and rehabilitation development, rehabilitation when it has not yet secured the educators and materials needed for formal technical educators? Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Klute. Before Mrs. Ngaba comes in, there's a breaking story we woke up to on Newsroom on a 29-year-old inmate that it's perceived, or the allegations that he would have succumbed due to injuries that might have occurred whilst was incarcerated in correctional facilities in Kgoshimamburu. Can we kindly get more information on the matter whilst members are asking questions, so that when you come back and respond to all questions and clarities, you bring light to the matter? Thank you so much. Ms. Ngabs.
Thank you, Chairperson. So my first question is to the Minister, and it's on overcrowding. I was already going to ask the question, but in light of the facts, the figures that he's shared with us today, it's even more concerning. So you mentioned the cost of building new prisons and how long that takes. My question, though, is what is the alternative? Because we can't have communities crying daily about the criminals who are sent back into our communities for bail as a threat to communities. At the same time, in this committee, you tell us how often you take inmates for bail review. It makes sense as part of your strategy, but I'm not sure that it goes together with what communities are calling for in terms of greater safety, apprehending threats. So is there an alternative actually to building more prisons? How do you put those two objectives together? Keep dangerous criminals off our street, but also don't create a crisis inside the centers if you don't build. And then I just wanted to make a comment on the farming and workshops. Granted, by your own metrics, you have breached your targets. My concern is your targets are quite small. You will all be aware, I am a massive fan of your agricultural programs. You are doing good work. I'm just not sure that it is being put to the best possible use at maximum level to get critical skills to offenders. And then I just want to open slide 50. I had a question for you. So you talk about percentage of parolees who have not been revoked. And on the next one, it's percentage of probationers who have not been revoked. That total that you have there, 7,771, what is that total? So you are measuring this as a percentage of the parolees who were released in the last year, in the last 5 years? What is that total actually made up of on both slides? I wanted to congratulate you on making the shift from measuring TVET participation to TVET completion. I understand that it makes your stats look ugly, but it gives us a real accomplishment. Whatever you do attain out of that stat is something honest, instead of padding figures with participation where you have nothing to show for it. I'm sure it's not an easy decision to make to introduce more red into your stats, but well done on taking the hard step and measuring things that actually matter. So now I want to go back to the stat I'm always asking you about, which is parole. I still don't see you telling us how many of those parole files were not considered because they didn't have the full data. So in other words, of those that were received, sure, you're doing good, decisions were made, but how many are actually turned back because they are not complete? What is the percentage of incomplete parole applications that you get? Because I suspect that a lot of injustice flows from that. Is people's files just perpetually being sent back? These are complaints that I receive relatively often. Do you calculate that? What is the metric for that? And then finally, on the bill, can you explain what the delay was in Manco considering it? Why was there a delay? And then I apologize, I said last one, but it's actually not. Slide 67. I'm sure I've asked you this before, but what is the difference between the HRBP tool versus the per cell vacancy? So on the one, your vacancy is only 7%, but on the other, your vacancy is 18%. Can you just remind us why that discrepancy exists?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the department for the presentation. I'll get right to the questions. In terms of your overall performance or the stagnation thereof, there's a bit of a performance contradiction. While mandates in care and social reintegration achieve perfect compliance, the administration program, which I think your departmental operational backbone, is far behind in terms of a 57% achievement rate. So your performance has stagnated to 83% for both the 25-26 and 26-27 financial years. Why has the department failed to recover its performance, especially considering that over the past 5 financial years, the best Q1 performance was achieved in 24-25 financial years? So what changed? The performance in both the administration and rehabilitation programs has regressed compared to Q1 of 25-26, with administration dropping from 83% to 57%, and rehabilitation dropping from 100% to 89%. What blockages are driving this double regression? What's the reason behind that? The target to develop the draft bill was missed, as the minister said. Given that different targets have been set for the next 3 quarters, can the department guarantee it will process this bill timeously so that Parliament can process it within the 7th administration? Then coming to parole boards, so I don't want to repeat the questions that's been asked already. I know you are most certainly going to say, well, there's advertisements out for the vacancies and, interviews will follow up and, the vacancies will be filled. But in terms of parole, how far are we in terms of the parole review process? that was started, we all went to the summit there at Popcru. Now, the TVET completion rate fell to 44.96% due to shortages of technical educators and curriculum upskill needs. Why was the TVET performance of the Eastern Cape and Limpopo, Mpumalanga Northwest regions omitted from the presentation to the Portfolio Committee? The target on inmate escaping from lawful custody was missed, with escapes occurring in the Eastern Cape. I think there was 2, Northern Free State, Northern Cape there was 2, and in KwaZulu-Natal there was 1. What specific failures led to these escapes, and what regional corrective action has been implemented to prevent the recurrence of this? Now, the smart technology rolled out was explained that it was solved now, so I'm not going to ask that one. Now, there's unequal overcrowding pressures. The national overcrowding rate reached 58%, with the average inmate population rising by 196 in Q1. Only the Free State and Limpopo, Mpumalanga Northwest regions kept overcrowding within the targets, while the Eastern Cape recorded the highest overcrowding, followed by Gauteng and the Western Cape. So what strategies are being deployed to address this extreme pressures on these 3 provinces? Now, coming to finance, so your nominal versus real budget growth. While the department budget increased nominally by 5.87%, the real term increase is only 2.39%. How is this limited real term growth impacting the department's long-term planning, especially with expenditure projected to rise to 32.8 billion in 28-29 financial years? 4 out of the 5 major programs overspent their quarterly projected plans. So incarceration, rehabilitation, care, and social reintegration. So why is the department failing to stick to its projected spending plans across these operational fronts? And what cost containment measures are being instituted? So is the reason for overspending bad planning, unforeseen circumstances? Because at this rate, you are going to run out of money before the end of the 3rd quarter. So what happens with the overspent? Does it go into accruals for next year? Or how do you deal with this? In contrast to operational overruns, the administration program underspent. What non-core services or critical IT or HR projects were delayed to cause this underspent? Because surely you planned to spend this money, but you didn't. What's the reason why you did not spend that money? Now, in terms of your collection deficit, why did you undercollect? And how will you ensure that you reach your annual target of 246 million? Coming to human resources, the ratio of psychologists to inmates stand roughly at 1 psychologist for every 2,344 inmates. How can the department claim its safety and rehabilitation indicators are effective when such a severe staff shortage directly compromises the execution of correctional sentence plans? JICS reported that 44 unnatural deaths were recorded in the Q1, compared to 24 in the same period last year. Now that's an 83% increase. What led to this increase? Or what circumstances? And does any short-term or long-term interventions exist that you are busy or planning to implement? Then labor. So the labor union Popcru has threatened countrywide industrial action over long-standing unresolved grievances, as they put it. What is the department's active plan to resolve these disputes and prevent a potentially bad situation at correctional facilities? The department's APP plans to train and appoint 2,500 entry-level correctional officers. How many of these officers were trained, appointed, and deployed in Q1? And which regions received them? Under the farm and production workshop targets, has the department actively worked to involve female inmates, addressing the persistent view that correctional skills are gendered and limit women to activities like beadwork and cooking? The department employed or reported to employ 416 youth on a contract basis. What do these posts entail? What is the duration of these contracts? And is there a plan for these youths to be permanently absorbed into the system? While the department exceeded its restorative justice target, what active efforts are being made to contact and consult victims of crime before inmates are released on parole? All members of this committee receive queries about this. People are being released and victims are not informed. If you can please address that. And then lastly, the Western Cape. This region underperformed compared to other regions. What specific regional challenges are driving this underperformance, and what target recovery interventions are being introduced? Thank you, Madam Chair. All from my side.
Thank you, Chair. It's very cold in here. I'm not sure if this is like a state mortuary. Please, can we adjust the aircon? Thank you, Sia. Ek bewe eintlik hierso. What are you saying, Minister? Heerlikheid. It's very cold. Thank you so much. It feels good to be back in this space now. I've read some of the report, I must be honest, and money spent, targets met, stats, reports, all of that. We must ask ourselves the question, does that translate to meaningful change and impact? That's the question I want to ask. After everything done, because sometimes we do things just to tick these boxes. And I'm very pleased to have heard the report about the classes being attended, that it is no longer, the focus is no longer just the participation, but completion. And hence we see that that target hasn't been met. But that's the meaningful things that we want to see in this report that reflects truth. I want to say, Minister, as you know, Parliament has just started with an inquiry into gangs. And when we met with some of the communities last week, DCS was featuring tops from all the NGOs and people that were present here. They spoke about the role that DCS plays towards the chaos unfolding in their communities. And things were said such as remand detainees, the mix, the mix between seasoned criminals and your entry-level criminals, and how they remain in those centers for years on end. And I want to ask you this morning, what programs do we have in place in the centers for your remand detainees? What access to any programs do they have? That's the first thing. It was said that DCS is an institution for criminality, for ranks. It's a breeding ground for gangs. You speak about reintegration and care programs. What targeted programs are in place, targeted, that specifically addresses gangsterism in the prisons? We speak about the programs, the one pillar reintegration. We had so many NGOs and NPOs sitting here saying that they are more than willing to work with DCS. Do you have any partnerships in place with NGOs and NPOs that can assist when you do release these parolees back into the community? I already spoke about the remand detainees and what access they have into programs. Also, we spoke the last time about, when we did our oversight, I recall us visiting the hospital section, and there we saw dual diagnosed inmates with other inmates that poses a risk. How far are we with that in terms of separating dual diagnosed, your mentally challenged inmates with your other inmates? Also, skills programs, your unaccredited causes. It is no use we continue throwing money, because this obviously contributes to the reintegration. They sit in prison, they have access, they go through these programs, but they remain unaccredited. When they come out, what accreditation do they have so that they can meaningfully reintegrate into our communities? And then also, we've heard, you know, when you speak to the community, daai waar jy die waarheid kry. We heard many stories of parolees getting out, but they actually got out those files that you receive on your desk, Minister. How are you auditing those files to ensure that what you receive is actually a process that the inmate indeed did follow or go through? Because we also heard allegations of people being paid to put certain things in that file. That is also something that I want to know. What are your checks and balances in place when you are signing off on those files? And then also, of the 243 centers, we know that security remains compromised at most of our centers. Of the 243 centers, we are still getting phone calls, we are still seeing contrabands going in. How many maintenance, I'm specifically speaking to maintenance contracts that speaks to security, right? How many contracts for security systems do you have in place to date? And then also, lastly, what percentage of body scanners aren't working at the 243 centers? I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Babshangas.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to the Minister and the Department under the leadership of National Commissioner, our guest, my colleagues, and some of the questions already asked, but what I want to know is I have two questions that I need more clarity on it. In the first question is in this quarter, how many escape, assault, and contraband statistics versus target, and how much does the department put aside in procuring post-chase scanners and body cams so that we'll make sure that the work of our officials are more easier. And then lastly, why was the target for parolees economic participation cut? And how does this align with reducing reoffending? I thank you.
Honorable Chair. Chair, let me start with the questions, and many of the questions are actually overlapping. More than one honorable member have asked the same question. And let me start by saying that there are many questions in terms of vacancies, specific positions and everything. The National Commissioner and his team will respond to those specifics. Let's go to the question from Honorable Maps. It's a with or without this X. Say X. Yeah. I don't want to say Honorable X, but you understand. It is about overcrowding and the cost of the overcrowding and what is the alternative, what we are going to do. And there were many questions about overcrowding. Now, as I mentioned, and it's not about excuses, it's about facts. We only have so much space. That's a fact. But what are we doing? Firstly, I am on record because some people say you must put more people on parole. That will reduce the overcrowding. I'm quite honest on that. I can't use parole as a tool to, can I say, reduce overcrowding. When someone is going on parole, you must ask yourself, what is the risk of reoffending? And we received many questions on reoffending or recidivism, and there's quite a lot of debates on that. Now, what I say that we can, for instance, use electronic bracelets. Because if you have a parolee who is, for instance, say a low to medium risk of reoffending, you may then consider, with all the other circumstances, that with an electronic bracelet, you can approve parole for that person because you can have specific monitoring 24/7 of that specific parolee. So that's one way. But it cannot be an excuse to say, we have overcrowding now, let's get the people out. I'm against that. But that is that. The other aspect in terms of parole is also that we are looking to see that people, when they go on parole, and they do qualify, that we have more, can I say, relationships with the communities where they go. For instance, I spoke to my counterpart from Zimbabwe. Ziyambi is the minister. And he said some of their parolees, if they want to release them, they go to the community with that inmate. And then they ask the community, will you take responsibility for this specific person if we release him or her on parole? That's something to look into. So we are looking at different ways in terms of the overcrowding. The other aspect of overcrowding is that there are infrastructure projects, and we are working hard on it now. And we had a presentation in this committee, and I made the calculation and it was presented, that, for instance, at present facilities, if we do certain infrastructure, can I say, upgradings and everything like that, we can create another 19,500 bed spaces. So we are busy focusing on that to see how we can, in the meantime, waiting for two facilities, although the two facilities is going to have a sort of effect, but it won't solve the problem of overcrowding, so that we can speed up those infrastructure projects to complete them and to make them available. We can also say to the committee that, unfortunately, having said that we are looking in the infrastructure, it is also costing a lot of money. And one of the members said that, I think it's the honourable member that said, but now we're blaming DPWI and we're blaming the Department of Justice. It's not blaming. It's facts. It's a lot of, and when we say that these are the problems, those are facts. Because the Department of Justice must ensure that they can also provide. DPWI, I would very much like to see that DPWI, Public Works, can allow us and, can I say, transfer some of our centres to correctional services so that we can do it ourselves. We have projects. We are now in a process, for instance, where we can save energy, bring down the electricity bill. But we need the permission from DPWI because it's their property. They're the custodian of all government land. So that is in terms of the overcrowding. The question was also asked on parole, how many files were incomplete? Of course, we can look into the matter to see exactly the number. I don't have it now with me. But let me say this in terms of incomplete files. And I do speak when it comes to lifers, because you know when a lifer's parole goes through the minister. If you have some incomplete files, it is not necessary that you cannot make a decision. You will, for instance, I will receive a file where there is a psychologist report. But then if I look at the risk of reoffending, I need also a report from a criminologist, because there are differences. And then I will refer it back to say, in this specific case, the risk of reoffending, say for instance, is moderate, and I say low to moderate, but then I also want a report from a criminologist, because criminologists can sometimes identify certain matters and issues with an applicant which a psychologist cannot identify. So that is also important. Let me say this, and I think I see the Honourable James is on her way. Let me quickly say on the gangs. It's a pity they didn't ask me or someone from the Department of Correctional Services to also come to the meeting or the conference, whatever they had, saying that we have a problem with gangs in correctional services. And of course, yes, I've said it many times. Of course we have a problem with the gangs. But what I said is to say that gangs started in correctional services centers is not correct. You can go back into the history. In 1902, there was a person that started gangs outside of prisons in Johannesburg. Yes, that the prisons enhance in a certain way gangsterism and everything that goes with that. It's true. We never denied that. And of course, we must look into that. And I said, and I know that General Makwanasi referred specifically to correctional services. And I said to my people, I want to see him. Not to ask him, why did you say that? I know why. I want to see him to say, how can we take hands to ensure that we effectively fight the gangs? And what did we do when it comes to the gangs? I mean, I know a lot of people say the gangs are out of control because the previous financial year we confiscated 37,500 cell phones. So it's out of control. The fact of the matter is, we confiscated those cell phones. That is actually proof that we are trying to do something to limit that. And I don't want to go in all the cell phone issues. We are taking further steps to ensure that that communication is broken down from gangs within and gangs without. And let me also say this. You will get the amendment bill. And if I can have my way, I would like to have in it that if a person or if an inmate joins a gang in prison, that he or she should not be eligible for parole. Must be a message. If we want to do certain things. So on the gangs, and I said, when we talk about gangs, there are many gang members who were never in a jail or in a prison. So it's also a community issue, and we must take hands to see how we can effectively fight that. So that's what I want to say on that. Coming back to the files, yes, there are certain problems when it comes to the case management committee. We are looking into that, and mostly those are issues that is not lifers and they're not coming to my desk. And the question is, do we have, I think, an auditing process on that? Now, let me say, talk again from my side. You have different reports. So I hear what the honourable members say that, yes, it's quite easy to put certain information in that is positive, which is in reality not so. But I mean, it's from the case management committee, then it goes to the parole board, then in Life's case, it goes to the National Council of Correctional Services, NCCS, and they make recommendations, and it comes to my table. Now, I think if you want to be corrupt, you will have to be very good to influence all those people before they come to me. And I can assure you, if somebody, I want to say that if they think they can try to corrupt me, they will end up in jail as well. So the fact of the matter is, but we will look into that. I have a problem because I'm also on record where, for instance, I've asked for a review on certain decisions of, can I say, high-profile offenders, which then was overturned by the NCCS. I know there are files that, for instance, the risk of reoffending is moderate, and then a parole board approves parole. I am on record, and I already spoke to some of them and said, how can you allow a person who has a moderate risk of reoffending back into the community? And they can't really explain to me, so that is a problem. So I do not shy away from those challenges, but let us address them. So I think that is from the honourable member. The more specific questions will be answered from the Commissioner. I don't want to take too much time. I also just want to say Can I just say, because there were a couple of questions on the underperformance in administration in terms of a disciplinary action and the procedure. But if you've read, you will also see we've requested to take it on review. So there's always differences. And can I say on, yeah, it was the Honourable Skopo who referred on a very creative way, bringing in G4S on the workers of Bloemfontein. Let me just say this, Honourable Chair, and you've mentioned that you're waiting for a legal opinion from Parliament. I would very much also like to see that. Not going into the merit of the cases, but we must just remember one thing. It was a Labour court who made a finding of a Section 197. Now, if that is the case, that it is a 197 issue, then all triple Ps of government, public-private partnerships, is then a matter that if that is the case, that you will have to take over the employees. And therefore, we're looking very carefully in it. And can I say, part of that is that if you have to do that, you have to bring people in with higher salaries of people in exactly the same position in the department. Is that really fair or not to do that? We did take about 268 of the members before the time, in the period of 6 months, to say that they can apply, which they did, on our conditions to qualify. But we must also remember that not all the employees of G4S do qualify. And the National Commissioner is on television and he was quite correct. Some of them are over the age limit of 60. Some of them had disciplinary cases against them, or whatever the case may be. So I know the emotion and I have sympathy with families in their situation. But unfortunately, we must also comply to the law. And of course, there are differences. I have a lot of problems when it comes to litigation against the department. There's one case, it's not G4S. And that case, when the finding was made, the duration was only 2 minutes. And you hear me correctly. The court sat for only 2 minutes. They went to the court. It started 10:05. Said some things and said the following documents had been served and so and so and so. And the judge said, okay. That's all. We are busy with the litigation. And I want to say that in that specific case, we will see what is the final outcome. I can't see that the judge in 2 minutes can make an informative decision. And I will look into the case, and if it's necessary, I will refer it to the Judicial Commission. It doesn't make sense. So we have those challenges. Can I say about the overspending lastly, Honourable Chair? Let me, before that, Popcru. Yes, the Commissioner is busy with Popcru. We started on a good foot with Popcru. And yes, of course, it's a labour union. They must fight for their members. But can I say that on Popcru? When we started with Bloemfontein, they agreed with us. Even when we responded, or when there was litigation, Popcru was a respondent. And about a day or two before the court case, they suddenly changed it to an applicant, part of the applicants. So that is one thing. And I say it, and I know I'm saying it in public. I understand that Popcru must fight for its members, but we must be rational on that. The commissioner is in conversation with them. There is quite good progress, and I do believe that we will get a solution as far as that is concerned. Chairperson, that's from my side. Can I say the overspending of 749? Of course, but we brought it down. At one stage, it was about 2 billion. And it's not easy because I said that there's increase in our overcrowding, and that is a vicious circle. The moment you have such an overcrowding percentage, 62% at this stage, it has an effect on each and every segment. That is also true. It has an effect on the employees because there's more pressure on them. We can't just by ratio just appoint more employees because we don't have the money for that, for the rehabilitation. And yes, of course, in overcrowding cells, you have your problems, specifically when it comes to the remand detainees. We must just remember one thing when it comes to remand detainees. We cannot force them to participate in certain programs because they are remand detainees. They are seen as innocents until proved guilty. And that is also sometimes a problem. But having said that, Honourable Chair, there are many challenges. We do not shy away, and I can assure you, we will not do blame shifting. It's our responsibility, but unfortunately there are facts which we must accept and which unfortunately we cannot change. Thank you.